These are McKeen motor cars, the world's first example of a steel self-propelled railcar. 152 were built during the early 1900s for over 40 railroads across North America and even Australia. Although these experimental cars showed early success, the technology was ahead of its time. However, they laid the groundwork for future rail motor cars. Let's learn more about these really cool machines. In 1897, financier and railroad executive E.H. Harriman wrangled control of the financially struggling Union Pacific. Harriman gained prominence in the railroading world by acquiring and revitalizing bankrupt lines. He believed profitability depended on superior rolling stock and a well-maintained right-of-way. During his leadership at UP, he invested nearly $50 million in improving its equipment, developed a standardization for passenger coaches, and helped it acquire control of the Southern Pacific in 1901. In 1904, Harriman became concerned about the unprofitability of running steam locomotives on small branch line passenger routes.
On all these rail lines in Nebraska or anywhere on any of the Harriman lines where you were hauling at most 30 passengers, you still had to buy a steam locomotive, a tender, a coach, and probably a combine or even a mail car with baggage. And you had to invest in that whole set of equipment. You had to hire 4 employees, fireman, engineer, brakeman, and conductor. And you had 2 types of fuel, water and coal or wood or whatever you were burning. And it was just expensive. It was too expensive to haul 30 passengers in the early half of the day and maybe 30 more passengers on the latter half.
Wanting to solve this challenge, Harriman invited UP's Superintendent of Motive Power and Machinery, William R. McKeen, to dinner at his New York office.
Harriman had just got back from vacation in France where he drove some early French automobiles. He was supposed to be on vacation, but he was telling the chauffeur to let him drive and learn how to drive this new, interesting device. Well, McKeen had just been at the St. Louis World's Fair and had seen a German experimental locomotive showing aerodynamic design on a steam locomotive cladded with steel skin. And those two ideas combined, a gas-powered small rail car that had preferably half the crew, only a motorman and a conductor, and was smaller, lighter, easier to transport. McKeen did put emphasis on building a lighter weight car, and that was one of the purposes, so that they could stop at any roadside road crossing. If someone flagged down the car, you could pick them up there rather than at a station.
Harriman sent McKeen off with $385,000 to build 4 experimental rail cars immediately. The first prototype, Motor Car Number 1, rolled out from the UP's shops in Omaha, Nebraska in March 1905. It rode on a steel frame with a wood body passenger compartment for 25 people. McKeen's styling was radical for the era: a pointed knife-edge nose, rounded tail, and smooth sides designed to reduce wind resistance. But there was a slight problem. Railroads had no purpose-built internal combustion engines. Instead, McKeen had to adapt an already existing power plant for his prototype.
The McKeen cars were propelled by a gasoline engine that was reversible, and about the only thing he could get his hands on in 1903, 1904 that was powerful enough was a ship's engine. It was a stanchion motor. It was 94 liters in size, very low RPM, so a very torquey motor. And he had a transmission that wrapped around the front axle that had 2 speeds. And because the gears were mounted on the axle, the drive axle itself, adding a reverse gear to that would be kind of difficult. So having a gasoline engine that could reverse itself, because in a ship you would need to reverse the gasoline engine to run the propellers backwards, made that a bit more efficient. And then to connect those two together, he mounted the gasoline engine transversely, so the crankshaft is parallel to the axle itself, and to transmit the power between those 2 points, he used a Morse silent chain drive to drive the transmission mounted on the axle itself. Pneumatics, secondarily, to actuate the clutch and engage either first or second gear.
After being placed into revenue service, engine issues became apparent. Gaskets blew, motor stanchions fractured, cooling and heating valves clogged, and the clutch slipped badly. McKeen eventually corrected these issues with the outshopping of motor car number 2 in September 1905. At nearly double the size of motor car number 1, number 2 could seat 58 passengers. It was the first car body to be constructed of all steel and the first to have 4 axles on 2 trucks. It also featured an improved air-operated clutch, replacing its hand-operated one for its 100-horsepower engine.
There's actually 4 people involved in the shaping and the design, the core design of the McKeen cars. Harriman brought the gasoline engine idea to the table. McKeen brought aerodynamics to the table, and I believe as a result of that, McKeen hired a shipbuilder who knows how to make things efficiently go through a liquid, which air is a liquid as well. He brought on the ship designer. And the 4th person in this is someone we all kind of know, and that's Edward Budd. And he was at the time the general shop manager of Hale and Kilburn. And if I recall, he developed a welding process for his car seats, railroad car seats. And so he was kind of a proponent of steel, a big proponent. McKeen had just built his very first experimental car, which was gasoline powered, had acetylene gas lighting, and was a wood-bodied car. Not a great idea. So very quickly, in conversations with Edward Budd at Hale and Kilburn, Budd convinced McKeen to switch to steel, and they had designed, with the engineer, a steel car body.
Motor cars numbers 3 through 6 were nearly identical in design to car 2. This changed with car number 7 in 1906. This version featured a drop center vestibule, a design that is still used today by buses and trolleys. The most notable difference was the car's porthole windows. The round windows were a key feature of the McKeen motor cars and served as an important part of the lightweight car's structural integrity.
I don't think it was intentional that they brought portholes over from ships, but it had a very strictly important purpose to the semi-monocoque design of the car body itself. If you have ever lived or ever been in an old Victorian home and you've tried to lift or raise the window, with a square, you've got 4 contact points that can move. And when the window frame doesn't change shape, you now have a hard time lifting the window. So McKeen knew that was going to be an issue. By putting the load on the wall, that was going to be an issue. So what he developed was an aluminum cast window frame. And by making it cast as one piece, it could be somewhat load-bearing, but it would hold its shape much better than a square piece of wood that's all nailed together and would possibly malshape it. So that's how he came up with a circular design, which isn't going to flex at any joint that's cast. He put that riveted from the inside on the steel skin. And on top of all that, he did it because if you have 2 plates of glass in a rail car and you fold one on top of the other, you still have glass there blocking you. So by having a porthole design, you can unscrew the porthole, hang it on the ceiling, and you've got a full 2-foot circle of view. So it was not only good for airflow, it was not only nice to have a full circle of view, it was also part of the structure of the car, and it wasn't going to jam up because the wall was load-bearing. All of those reasons are why.
As later examples of McKeen cars got longer, the extra space allowed for a baggage and express compartment. Because early McKeen cars lacked a dedicated baggage door, and their 24-inch drop-center doors were too narrow for large items like steamer trunks, McKeen introduced towable baggage trailers to handle the overflow. Some even included a railway post office section. By 1907, McKeen, wanting to expand the reach of his cars, persuaded Harriman to allow him to manufacture them independently from Union Pacific. Harriman provided UP's North Shop Complex as its base of operations, arranged industry connections, and even hosted a grand New York reception. The McKeen Motor Car Company officially incorporated on July 1, 1908, with both Harriman and McKeen owning a majority of its stock. While Union and Southern Pacific lines owned the bulk of its rail cars produced early on, other railroads quickly wanted to try them out.
One railroad, the Illinois Central, bought one. The Erie Railroad bought 3 or 4. Pennsylvania Railroad had one. Norfolk Southern, the original Norfolk Southern, had one car. Southern Railway had a car. Santa Fe had four. That's Mcken Santa Fe. Northern Pacific had one. Milwaukee Road supposedly got one secondhand. Chicago Northwestern Railway had one. Chicago Great Western had three or four. Ann Arbor Railroad had five. So they really kind of went all over, and a lot of people experimented with these cars.
In 1911, the company entered the foreign market with the sale of two 5-foot 3-inch broad gauge cars for the Victorian Railways. These cars were shipped overseas in giant wooden crates, partially disassembled and put together after arrival in Australia. They were followed by 5 additional narrow gauge cars that were ordered and sent as full kits to the Queensland Railways in 1912. Unfortunately, the Landau undercars were plagued with mechanical issues because they were entirely custom compared to previous Mckeens. During the 1920s, they were de-engined for use as regular passenger cars pulled by steam locomotives. As other railroads continued to test McKeen cars, the same complaints about high maintenance cost and poor reliability resurfaced. Defensive about his product, McKeen dismissed critics with selective statistics and refused to listen to his own employees' suggestions for improving the design. By 1912, McKeen was struggling to sell his motor cars. In a vain attempt to save his company, he began building and marketing small industrial switch engines for tasks like weed burning and concrete mixing. The factory's last car would be produced in 1917.
The major problem was the transmission. The engine was mounted not to the car body, but because it was low RPM and McKeen didn't want the low RPM engine shaking the car body and disrupting passengers the entire time you're riding the car, he mounted it to the motor truck. And that made it easier because then he could control the distance between the crankshaft of the engine and the transmission. Well, the transmission is wrapped around using the axle as a bearing wrapped around the front axle. And then on those rough railroads, rough track out in Nebraska or wherever, where it's jointed rail and not kept up as well as high-speed rail, what would be high-speed back in the day, that transmission took all of the shock and the brunt of the force. And on top of that, the easiest way I put it, the easiest way I say it is you can produce 3,000 foot-pounds of torque all day long. It's getting it to the wheels that's the hard part. And the clutch was not very great. There was no sensitivity to the clutch because it was all pneumatically actuated with brake cylinders. With a brake valve was how they controlled the transmission.
After the McKeen Motor Car Company was dissolved, many cars were retired and scrapped by the Great Depression. Others served new purposes, such as roadside diners, storage sheds, and demotorized passenger cars. One of these roadside diners wound up as a plumbing supply store before being donated to the Nevada State Railway Museum in 1996. Built in 1910 as Virginia and Truckee Railway Motor Car 22, it was completely rebuilt from the ground up and began operating again for its 100th anniversary of construction. Another surviving motor car is now under restoration by Madison Kirkman, owner and president of the McKeen Motor Car Company Historical Society in Ramona, California.
I was a young kid and I saw a picture of a McKeen car in a logging railroad book, and I thought it was the coolest thing. It's the first time I've ever seen one. From there, my dad wanted to take me up to the Nevada State Railroad Museum, which he had been there 30 years prior. And when I was looking up what they had at that museum, I saw they had a McKeen car. So I took interest in going up, and my father took me up, and I was 13 years old or so at the time, and I got to ride the darn thing. And it was a cool experience. And with that interest of mine, I was bothered that I couldn't find any good central source of information on these cars. So that's where I started my website, McKeencar.com. From there, I started studying every car that was ever built, every experiment of McKeen's, all of the railroads that had those cars. In doing all that, I found out and researched that San Diego had 3 of these McKeen cars in total. 2 of them went to a railroad that ran between San Diego and La Jolla, and there was a second railroad that ran from San Diego up through Lemon Grove, Santee, El Cajon, Lakeside, and a final town called Foster. Well, that's of particular importance to me because in 1908 to 1912, that's how people got to my town of Ramona. that was of quite interest to me. And I had found out that that car survived up in Anchorage, Alaska. So just as a 13, 14-year-old studying this stuff, I found out who the historical organization was in Anchorage that had this car body. And that's all it was a car body. No wheels, none of the undercarriage, no engine. And I was keeping track on online forums and such, and people had noted it started jumping between different locations. It was in one storage yard, and they had to be moved to another one, and it looked like something was up. So I got in contact with the owner, the CEO of that historical organization. They couldn't hold on to the car anymore. They'd spent too much money trying to store it. They were given some land by the city, and homeless people moved into their work shed, and they had to get rid of the car. They couldn't hold on to this 50-foot long rail car anymore. So they said, look, if you're so interested in these cars, you can have it. I was basically a better home than it was up there, because they were going to have to scrap it or do something, anything. And the final place it was resting in Anchorage was a scrapyard. It took me 1 year and 4 months to raise all the money and get the plan figured out. But we did move the car, and it moved 2 weeks before that scrapyard closed down. They demoed the whole thing. It was on the magnitude of about $18,000. This was back in 2016. That was the point where I had gotten a cheap enough quote to move the car. Those two price points met. We pulled the trigger, and we were able to move the car from Anchorage, Alaska, all the way down to Ramona, California, where it's been sitting in the backyard at my place. And because, what's a better place in the backyard to put a whole rail car? But we're currently in the midst of engineering the car. We have an engineering firm going through the whole car body, original blueprints, dimensions, etc. And they're making sure that the way we want to restore the car will be structurally sound, it's going to be safe. And so we're doing that legwork first. That's the important part of the first bit of the restoration. And once we have a blueprint as to how to restore the car, then we can progress.
In the late winter of 2025, the McKeen Motor Car Historical Society rescued the Southern Pacific trailer car T16. To learn more about their project and/or donate, please visit McKeenCar.com. Although McKeen cars had a short lifespan in retrospect, they were bold, innovative, and decades ahead of their time. They also ushered in the diesel era of self-propelled rail cars, most notably built by Edward Budd's company, the same man who had convinced McKeen to switch from wood to all-steel construction. Until next time, thanks for watching.